There will come a time, maybe it's now, when it feels like the whole world has turned against you, when the people you counted on have pulled away, when the room goes quiet as you enter, when your choices are questioned, your character is doubted, and the crowd that once stood beside you now stands against you. It's one of the most disorienting, isolating experiences a human being can face. The feeling that everyone is against you, that you are standing alone against a tide of disapproval, doubt, and hostility, with no one in your corner and nowhere to hide. And in that moment, most people break. Not physically, but inwardly. They crumble under the weight of the opposition. They abandon their position to win back approval. They start doubting themselves, because when enough people tell you you're wrong, you begin to believe it. They shrink, they apologize for things they shouldn't apologize for. They betray their own judgment just to make the hostility stop. The pressure of everyone being against them collapses their inner world, and they surrender not because they were actually wrong, but because they could not bear to stand alone. But there is another way. There is a way to remain unshakable when everyone is against you, to stand firm in the storm of opposition, without breaking, without crumbling, without betraying yourself. It is not a trick or a technique. It is a fundamental shift in where you locate your stability, your worth, and your sense of what is true. The philosophers understood it. The Stoics built their entire philosophy around it, and it is available to anyone willing to do the inner work required to build it. Today, I'm going to show you how to become the kind of person who cannot be shaken by opposition, who can stand alone against the whole world and remain unmoved, unbroken, and free. This will require some hard truths, because becoming unshakable is not comfortable and it is not easy. But by the end, you'll understand exactly why some people crumble the moment the crowd turns against them, while others stand like a rock in the storm, and how to become the second kind of person. If you've ever had to stand alone against everyone, type "I stand firm" in the comments. Let's begin. Let's start by understanding why opposition breaks most people so easily, because until you see the mechanism, you can't defend against it. The reason the hostility of others has such power over you is that, for most people, their sense of who they are and whether they're okay comes from outside themselves. It comes from other people's approval, agreement, and acceptance. Their inner stability is built on external validation. And so when that external validation is withdrawn, when the crowd turns against them, the very foundation of their sense of self collapses, because that foundation was never inside them to begin with. It was always in the hands of others. Think about what this means. If your sense of being okay depends on others approving of you, then anyone who disapproves of you holds power over your inner state. And when everyone disapproves, when the whole crowd turns against you, then everyone holds that power at once, and your inner world is overwhelmed. Crushed under the collective weight of disapproval you have no defense against. You crumble not because the opposition is actually powerful, but because you handed it all your power in advance by building your stability on the very thing that has now been withdrawn. You made your peace dependent on their approval. And now that their approval is gone, your peace goes with it. If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your own estimate of it. And this you have the power to revoke at any moment. Here is the first key to becoming unshakable. The pain of everyone being against you is not coming from their opposition itself. It's coming from your judgment about their opposition, from the meaning you're assigning to it. You're telling yourself that their disapproval means you're wrong, that their hostility means you're bad, that their rejection means you're worthless. And it is those judgments, not the opposition itself, that are breaking you. The Stoics understood that between what happens to you and how you feel about it lies your own interpretation, and that interpretation is entirely within your power. Other people can oppose you, but whether that opposition devastates you or leaves you unmoved depends on the judgment you make about it, and that judgment is yours to control. So the first work of becoming unshakable is to separate the fact of opposition from the meaning you're assigning to it. The fact is, some number of people disagree with you, dislike you, or stand against you. That's all. That's the entire fact. Everything else, therefore I'm wrong, therefore I'm bad, therefore I should give up, is interpretation you've added. And that interpretation is what's actually breaking you. Strip it away, and you're left with a much smaller, much more bearable fact. People are opposing me. And people opposing you, in itself, has no power to determine your worth or the truth of your position. It's just a fact about what other people are doing. What it times means, times is up to you. Now let's go to the deepest root of unshakability, the thing that everything else is built on. You must locate your stability inside yourself, not in the opinions of others. This is the entire foundation. The person who can stand unshaken when everyone is against them is the person whose sense of worth, whose sense of being okay, whose stability comes from within, from their own judgment of themselves, their own values, their own assessment of whether they're living rightly. Because when your stability comes from inside, external opposition cannot reach it. People can disapprove all they want, but they cannot touch a foundation that was never in their hands. You've built your inner citadel on ground they cannot access, and so their hostility, however intense, breaks against its walls and leaves you standing. Nowhere can a man find a more peaceful retreat than in his own soul. This inner citadel, this retreat within your own soul that no external force can breach, is the source of all real unshakability. The Stoics understood that if you build your peace on anything outside yourself, you are at the mercy of that external thing. Build it on wealth, and you'll be shaken when wealth is threatened. Build it on others' approval, and you'll be shaken the moment they disapprove. But build it inside yourself on your own character, your own values, your own judgment, and you become unshakable because you've built your foundation on the one thing that no one else can take from you or touch. When everyone is against you, you retreat into this inner citadel, and from within its walls, you watch the storm of opposition rage outside without it ever reaching you. That is what it means to be unshakable, to have a center that the world cannot touch. But building this inner citadel requires something specific, and it's the hardest part. You have to know, for yourself, that you are living rightly. Because the inner citadel is not built on arrogance or stubbornness, it's built on genuine integrity. The reason you can stand unshaken when everyone is against you is that you have looked honestly at your own conduct, your own choices, your own character, and you know by your own deepest judgment that you are acting with integrity. That knowledge, held firmly inside you, is what allows you to withstand the disapproval of the whole world. Because when you truly know you're doing what's right, then others' disapproval cannot shake your sense of the rightness of your action. They can think what they think. You know what you did and why you did it, and that knowledge is your fortress. The best revenge is not to be like your enemy. Notice what this points to. When people turn against you, the temptation is to become like them, reactive, hostile, consumed by the conflict, defined by your opposition to your opposers. But the unshakable person doesn't do this. They stay anchored in their own values, their own character, regardless of how others behave toward them. They don't let the hostility of others turn them into someone hostile. They don't let the opposition of others define who they are. They remain themselves grounded in their own integrity while the storm rages around them. This is a crucial part of unshakability. You cannot be shaken from your center if you refuse to let others' behavior pull you out of it. Stay who you are. Let them be who they are. And keep your feet planted firmly on your own ground. Now I have to introduce a hard and necessary truth, because unshakability without this truth becomes mere stubbornness, and stubbornness is not strength. Here it is. Sometimes, when everyone is against you, they might actually be right, and the unshakable person must be able to face this possibility honestly, without letting it collapse them. This is the razor's edge that real strength walks. On one side is the weakness of crumbling under any opposition, abandoning your position the moment people disagree. On the other side is the false strength of stubbornness, refusing to ever consider that the opposition might have a point, digging in out of ego rather than genuine conviction. True unshakability lives between these two. It is the strength to stand firm when you're right, combined with the honesty to genuinely consider whether you might be wrong. So how do you tell the difference? How do you know whether to stand firm against the opposition or to genuinely reconsider your position? Here is the discipline. When everyone turns against you, you must do something difficult. You must honestly examine whether they have a point, with real openness, setting your ego aside. Look at the substance of their opposition, not just the fact of it. Ask yourself, sincerely, is there truth in what they're saying? Am I actually wrong here? Have I made a mistake I need to correct? And you must be willing to genuinely hear the answer, even if it's uncomfortable, because a person who cannot ever admit they're wrong is not unshakable, they're just rigid. And rigidity is a kind of weakness, pretending to be strength. But here's the crucial second half. If, after honest examination, real, ego-free examination, you conclude that you are in fact right, that your position is sound, that your conduct has integrity, then you stand firm. No matter how many people are against you, the number of people opposing you is not evidence. Truth is not determined by majority vote. History is full of individuals who stood alone against the entire crowd and were vindicated because they were right and the crowd was wrong. The unshakable person examines the opposition honestly, and then, if their examination confirms they're right, they hold their ground with total firmness, precisely because their firmness is now built not on ego, but on genuine, tested conviction. They've done the hard work of considering they might be wrong, concluded they're right, and so they can stand with a clear conscience against the whole world. It never ceases to amaze me. We all love ourselves more than other people, but care more about their opinion than our own. Sit with the strangeness of this. You have more information about your own conduct, your own reasons, your own integrity than anyone else could ever have. You were there for every choice you made. You know why you did what you did. And yet, when others disapprove, you're tempted to trust their judgment of you formed from the outside, with limited information, often colored by their own agendas over your own deep, informed knowledge of yourself. That is backwards. Your own honest assessment of your conduct, made from the inside with full information, deserves more weight than the assessment of a crowd judging you from the outside. When you've examined yourself honestly and found that you're acting with integrity, that judgment should stand firm against 1,000 external opinions formed with a fraction of the information you have. Let me now address the specific pain of opposition, because becoming unshakable doesn't mean becoming numb, and I won't pretend it does. When everyone turns against you, it hurts. The isolation is real. The loss of belonging is painful. The doubt that creeps in is agonizing. Becoming unshakable doesn't mean you feel none of this. It means you feel it without being destroyed by it. It means the pain washes over you without moving you from your center. The unshakable person is not a stone that feels nothing. They're a deeply rooted tree that bends in the storm but does not break, that feels the full force of the wind but remains planted. Don't mistake unshakability for the absence of feeling. It's the presence of a root system deep enough that the feeling, however intense, cannot uproot you. And part of that root system is understanding something about crowds and opposition that takes their power away. When everyone turns against you, it feels like a unified, monolithic wall of judgment, as if the whole world has examined you carefully and rendered a verdict. But this is almost never what's actually happening. Crowds are not wise, they're reactive. People turn against someone not usually through careful individual judgment, but through social contagion. One person's disapproval spreads to another and another until a mob forms, most of whom haven't thought about the matter carefully at all and are simply following the emotional current. The everyone that's against you is often not a considered verdict but a herd reaction, and a herd reaction carries no more authority than the impulse that started it. When you understand that the wall of opposition is often just contagious reactivity rather than careful judgment, it loses much of its power to shake you. The object of life is not to be on the side of the majority, but to escape finding oneself in the ranks of the insane. The Stoic Marcus Aurelius understood that being on the side of the majority is no guarantee of being right, that the crowd is often collectively mistaken, swept up in reactions that have nothing to do with truth. So the fact that the majority is against you tells you almost nothing about whether you're actually wrong. The majority has been against countless people who were later proven right. The majority is frequently, collectively, wrong. To let the sheer number of people opposing you determine your sense of the truth is to surrender your judgment to a crowd that has no special access to truth and is often driven by contagion rather than wisdom. Stand on what you've honestly examined and found to be true, and let the majority be the majority. Their number is not their rightness. Now let's talk about the practical disciplines that build unshakability, because this is not just a matter of understanding, it must be developed, practiced, built over time, like a muscle. The first discipline is to build your inner citadel before you need it. You cannot construct a foundation of self-worth in the middle of a crisis. It must be built in advance, in the ordinary days, so that it's already there when the storm comes. This means, in your everyday life, working to locate your sense of worth inside yourself, developing your own values, living according to them, and validating yourself by your own standards rather than constantly reaching for external approval. The person who has spent years building their worth on others' approval will have no citadel to retreat to when the crowd turns against them. The person who has built their worth internally, day by day, will have a fortress ready and waiting. So begin now, before you need it. Every day, you validate yourself from within rather than from without. You add a stone to the citadel that will one day shelter you. The second discipline is to practice standing firm in small oppositions so you're prepared for large ones. Unshakability, like any strength, is built through progressive practice. You don't start by standing alone against the whole world. You start by holding a minor, unpopular opinion in a small group, by making a choice a few people disapprove of, by tolerating small doses of disapproval without crumbling. Each time you stand firm in a small opposition and survive it, you build the strength to stand firm in a larger one. You prove to yourself, experientially, that you can withstand disapproval and remain intact, and you slowly retrain the deep instinct that treats disapproval as catastrophe. By the time a real storm comes, a moment when everyone is genuinely against you, you'll have built, through countless small trials, the strength to remain standing. He who has a why to live can bear almost any how. This applies with tremendous force to standing alone. If you have a clear, strong sense of why you're doing what you're doing, a deep conviction about your values, your purpose, the rightness of your path, then you can bear almost any amount of opposition. The people who crumble under hostility are often those who never had a strong why to begin with, who were doing what they did for shallow or borrowed reasons, and so had no deep foundation to stand on when challenged. The people who stand unshaken are those anchored in a powerful why, a purpose or conviction so meaningful to them that no amount of external opposition can outweigh it. So cultivate your why. Know deeply why you stand where you stand, because a strong enough why makes you able to bear any how, including the how of standing utterly alone. The third discipline is to confine yourself to the present moment when the opposition feels overwhelming. Much of the suffering of being against everyone comes from projecting into the future, imagining endless rejection stretching ahead, catastrophizing about where this opposition will lead, drowning in dread of what's to come. But in the actual present moment, you are usually okay. Right now, in this instant, you are breathing, you are standing, you are intact. The Stoics practiced returning to the present precisely because the present is almost always bearable, while the imagined future is where terror lives. When the weight of everyone being against you feels crushing, bring yourself back to the now. Handle this moment, then the next. You don't have to withstand an imagined eternity of opposition. You only have to stand firm in this present moment, and then the one after it. And that is always possible. And the fourth discipline is to accept the loneliness of standing alone, rather than fleeing from it. There is real loneliness in being unshakable, when everyone is against you. The loneliness of the one who will not join the crowd, who stands apart, who holds their ground alone. And the temptation, always, is to end that loneliness by surrendering, by abandoning your position, rejoining the herd, buying back your belonging with your integrity. The unshakable person refuses this bargain. They accept the loneliness as the price of standing firm, and they discover that it is a bearable price, far more bearable than the self-betrayal of surrendering what they know to be right. And often, they discover something more, that standing alone with integrity is not as lonely as it seems, because they have their own respect, their own clear conscience, their own company. And that is a companionship the surrendered crowd follower never has, even surrounded by the approval they sold themselves to buy. Here is what all of this comes down to, the truth at the center of becoming unshakable. The world will, at times, turn against you. This is unavoidable if you live with any integrity at all, because a person who never faces opposition is a person who never stood for anything, never made a hard choice, never lived by their own values rather than the crowd's. Opposition is the price of being a real individual. And so the question is not whether you will face moments when everyone is against you, you will, but whether you will crumble when those moments come, or stand firm. And that depends entirely on where you've built your foundation. If you've built it outside yourself on the approval, agreement, and acceptance of others, then you will crumble, because the storm will wash away the very thing you were standing on. But if you've built it inside yourself, on your own character, your own values, your own honest judgment of whether you're living rightly, then you will stand, because the storm cannot reach a foundation it cannot touch. The unshakable person is simply a person who has moved their foundation inside, into the one place the world cannot reach, and who has done the hard, honest work of ensuring that what they're standing on is genuine integrity rather than mere ego. From that inner ground, they can face the opposition of the whole world and remain unmoved, not out of arrogance, not out of numbness, but out of a deep, tested, self-owned strength that no crowd can shake. And here is the final truth, the one that transforms the whole experience. The moment when everyone is against you is not only a trial, it is also the greatest opportunity you will ever have to discover who you actually are. Because it is precisely when the external supports are stripped away, when the approval is gone, when you're forced to stand on your own foundation or fall, that you find out what you're truly made of. The person who has always been surrounded by approval never knows their own strength because it's never been tested. But the person who has stood alone against everyone and remained unshaken knows, forever after, that they possess a strength that does not depend on anyone else, a strength that is genuinely their own. And that knowledge, once earned, can never be taken away. You emerge from the trial of standing alone, not weaker, but immeasurably stronger, having discovered a self-sufficiency and an inner solidity that most people never find, because most people never had to. So when the world turns against you, and it will do not see it only as a catastrophe to survive, see it also as the forge in which your unshakable self is made. Stand firm on your own honestly examined ground. Let the storm rage. Feel the pain without letting it uproot you. Consider honestly whether you're wrong. And if you conclude you're right, hold your position against the whole world and discover, in the standing, a strength you never knew you had, the strength of a person who has learned to be unshakable, whose foundation is within, and whom the world, for all its opposition, cannot move. So I'll leave you with the only question that matters. When everyone turns against you, will you crumble and surrender what you know to be right? Or will you stand firm on your own ground, unshaken, and discover the unbreakable strength that was inside you all along? If your answer is the second one, drop unshakable in the comments right now. Speak it into existence. Make that promise to yourself. Because the world will test you. It will turn against you. It will try to break you with its disapproval, its hostility, its overwhelming opposition. And on that day, everything will depend on where you built your foundation. Build it within on your own integrity, your own values, your own honest judgment, and you will stand like a rock in the storm, unshaken when everyone is against you, and free in a way that those who need the crowd's approval can never be. The strength to stand alone is already inside you. All that remains is to build it, claim it, and stand.